to Politicking. My guest is Ron Paul, the former Republican U.S. Congressman from Texas. He's founder of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity, and he's joining us from Lake Jackson, Texas. Where do you think the Mueller investigation's heading, Ron?
It's the same way it's been heading, downhill. I can't imagine what's going on there, because I think they are making a mountain out of a molehill, to tell you the truth. But I think it's so partisan, and yet I say there's too much bipartisanship in Washington when it comes to issues, spending and wars and these kind of things. But when it comes to power, there's really a bipartisan fight. And this is a fight over power, and I think Trump sets himself up for trouble like this. I don't think Russia had very much to do with deciding who got elected last go-around. And I don't think it's quite fair and balanced. I think Trump has a point when he talks about why don't we investigate some of those funds that went into the Clinton Foundation? So it's more about politics, but I think that I don't think that, well, I think they may end up putting people in jail, but I don't think that, the amazing thing to me is, if Trump is this strong, tough leader, why would his administration make sure they picked this guy is about as anti-Trump as you can get, and hire everybody who's been in opposition to Trump, and then Trump complains about it? But so I get confused on that, to tell you the truth.
What do you make up of the Republican Party today? Has it changed significantly since you left?
Philosophically, not. I think it's changed because the Democrats have changed and the country has changed. And I think the problem is that we are now bankrupt. The debt is unmanageable. If interest rates go up, it'll be a total calamity. So they keep the interest rates very, very low, and this will keep the economy in the doldrums. In spite of Wall Street doing well, there is still the division of the distribution of wealth, which I think is the major source of the social friction which is going on. So the Republican Party has changed like the Democratic Party, because they're looking for power, but they have absolutely no answers, because they are still supporting the prevailing attitude that the people generally have supported: governments to take care of me from cradle to grave, take care of all my medical needs, take care of all my educational needs, take care of all the bailouts, and the rich get to write the rules and they get the bailouts first. But this is coming to an end, and I don't think they want to admit the truth that the country's bankrupt and that we're supposed to cut something. That is not ever considered in Washington, and the Republicans who pay lip service to that, they don't do any better than the Democrats, and the Democrats don't do any better than the Republicans on the issue of war and civil liberties. So it's a mess, and it's coming to an end because this is a non-viable system. Economically, it'll collapse. The foreign policy is not doing well, and the people aren't going to tolerate this division and disparity in income distribution, because that is a result of the monetary system that we have, and a system that takes care of the rich over the poor.
President Trump takes great credit for the stock market. Why don't you salute him on that?
Well, Larry, that's sort of like when Obama came in. He came in 09, and, things were really, really bad, and they stayed bad and are still bad. And the Republicans jumped on him. Oh, look at what the economy is like under Obama. Obama had nothing to do with the collapse in 08, 09, and all of 10. That was a result of monetary policy and spending and the Federal Reserve under the Republicans, under Bush. So, no, I think Trump's making a serious mistake by taking any credit, because next month or so, you're going to see a calamity drop in the stock market. Then what's he going to say? Oh, yeah, I'm responsible for that. You can't take credit for something you don't deserve and then try to escape the blame if you're going to say, well, I'm responsible for the good times.
What do you make of the Roy Moore story in Alabama?
I wished it would go away. That's what I wished. And I think there's too many demagogues on both sides. And of course, I don't think anybody knows the real results on this. But I think the Republicans are hysterical, to deal with this subject. But
well, don't you think it's a serious subject? Sexual harassment is a serious subject in America, in Congress.
No, I don't think they're dealing with that. I think they're dealing with who gets seated and how they're going to vote. I mean,
based on sexual harassment.
We're not talking about. Yeah, well, but we're going to solve all that problem in the Congress, Larry. They're all going to take training about what sexual harassment is. If we're at this point where the politicians teach the politicians what sexual harassment is, we're in big trouble. And I think we're going to teach people about sound economic policy. But that's what's coming. Sure, it's serious. The Libertarians condemns any act of violence. There could be nothing worse than the rape and the abuse of another person. So it's horrible. But that represents an attitude that is not going to be solved by the politicians. But yes, the people in Alabama have every right to ask these questions and make their own decisions.
Right.
But I think the demagoguery is out of control, and that's why I said I wish it just would go away.
Syria has formally joined the Paris deal aimed at slowing climate change. The United States is the only country in the world in opposition to that pact. Where do libertarians stand on climate change?
Well, if anybody with property does anything to disturb the climate or the environment, they're 100% reliable. One of the reasons why we ended up with a collusion of big business and government was in the Industrial Revolution is that they made it so that you couldn't file suits, and there was a lot of pollution. I lived in Pittsburgh, and the rivers became, a sewer, and it wasn't cleaned up till a long time later, but not with the federal government, by just the city of Pittsburgh saying, this isn't right. You can't destroy another person's property. So the environment is ruined. I think there's a lot of questions to ask about whether it really changes the climate, because quite frankly, it is very evident they don't talk about global warming anymore. They talk about climate change as if the storm we had here last week had something to do with people in California doing something with the weather, and that's why we had a bad flood. So I think that's way overblown.
What worries Ron Paul the most? You must lose sleep over a lot of things. What tops the list?
I don't lose sleep, and they used to kid me a bit in Congress when I'd vote by myself, and I would always kid them. I said, but I sleep well at night because I just, look at it and do what I think is right. It's amazing. I think of all the problems, whether it's the foreign policy or the economic problems of the Federal Reserve and the overtaxation, overregulation, and all this stuff. But really, the government is a reflection of the people. And I think that we've lost our way in many ways, individually in a moral sense. And, I believe it was Adams who said that, yes, we have given you, a system that won't work if you don't have a moral people. Freedom doesn't work if there's no self-responsibility. So maybe our system that was devised that worked pretty well and is not working now is because we don't have the moral responsibility. You would say, I know you talked a little bit about medical care, and maybe there was a time 50 years ago when I started where people were more generous, the doctors were more generous, and people weren't left out. But if that happens where that people become less morally responsible for themselves or for the family, or the family breaks down, maybe the government that the libertarians are promoting makes it more difficult. Maybe we're not capable of doing that unless we change the people's sense of responsibility for themselves. I think that becomes the solution. Matter of fact, if you're not responsible for yourself and you don't take care of yourself and your family, you lose a sense of satisfaction. I think that's where satisfaction comes from.
But how do you get that? You can't make a law.
No, that's right. That's why I say it's sort of ironic. Here I talk about all these problems, and I come up with something that we need to change the hearts and minds of people. I know that is true educationally. You have to change people's understanding, because we've lived now, for nearly 100 years with a Keynesian type of economic interventionism where they teach that deficits are good and that you should have a Federal Reserve that prints money when you need it. Well, I think that that is an idea that hasn't worked, but I think the more moral standards have eroded. Let's say if you wanted to, just for instance, what if it is the breakdown of the family? You know, that is the basic problem. And that you had a better family unit where they did assume responsibility for themselves, it would solve a lot of the problem. You're right. You don't pass a law for that. So maybe what we have in Washington is a reflection of us out here. If we know and believe and understand the proper role of government and there's a prevailing attitude, believe me, the members of Congress are going to vote the right way. When I did a lot of work on auditing the Fed, I got the people in the country to say, hey, that sounds like a pretty good idea. And I had a unanimous Republican vote and passed wholeheartedly in the House of Representatives. But we changed the attitudes about the people. So I think there are economic attitudes and foreign policy attitudes, but there's also a moral attitude, which I think might be on top of the list on this deferring to government and the acceptance of the use of force. See, the opposite of a libertarian is saying that it is proper for government to use force. Most Americans, I think, conservatives and liberals and all, they agree we're not supposed to go and steal from our neighbors. We're not supposed to go to our neighbors and beat up each other either. Everybody knows that's wrong to do it. But nobody hardly, other than libertarians, challenges the thing that says, should the government be able to go and steal? So if you have no cars, Larry, and I have 3, and you send your congressman over and say, hey, I need one of Ron Paul's car, and they do it, and if I don't give you the car, I go to jail, that's the use of government force. It's that principle that has to be challenged.
Ron, you are
How many cars do you have, Larry?
Yeah, I have more than one. I want to thank you, Ron, for you're always very interesting and always great talking with you.
Thank you, Larry.
Ron Paul, and thank you for joining me on this edition of Politicking. Remember, you can join the conversation on my Facebook page or tweet me at King's Things. And don't forget, use the Politicking hashtag. And that's all for this edition of Politicking.